Actually, there was an intergovernmental agreement. We didn't mention that. In 2015, in Paris, at the, I think, 20th session of the IPCC, the countries did reach an agreement. It was, again, something that you would call a non-binding agreement. So, yeah, there was no policing on it. But the countries sort of voluntarily committed that they will do maximum efforts to reduce climate change. Obviously, there was nothing quantifiable. It was like a nice agreement. It was a nice photo opportunity. But there was something. There was actually one even before in Kyoto in 93. But that was mostly concerning pollution. But it was similar. But then, Trump came and then said, we're going to pull out of the agreement. And China never signed the agreement in the first place. So you can have all these agreements, but if the large countries, and it's basically comes down to two countries. It's China and the US who account for half of the global emissions. So, if these countries are not on board, then, as you said, you can go down to the individual level, but even as a small country, let's say Hungary or Romania level, your emissions are like 1,000th or 1/10,000th of the emissions of China. So what are you bothering about? So there's like a countrywide bystander effect as well. But at the same time, I think there's also a lot of reasons for hope. Because even though China is the largest emitter, there are also the largest user of electric vehicles and also the largest user of renewable energy, both solar panels as well as wind turbines. So if your economy is doing well, then you also have more money for innovation, which also means that you have more money for alternative technologies. So maybe it's worth the wait. Oftentimes, what I hear is that I do a lot of sort of field trips in developing countries. And then every developing country now, when you are sort of trying to put up a new electricity system, you're not putting up a diesel generator anymore, like it used to be the case 10 years ago. Now you're putting up a solar panel. Or maybe maximum you're putting up a solar panel diesel hybrid. But a lot of times it's a biogas generator and the solar panel. Sometimes it's a wind turbine. So if the technology of the Western countries wouldn't have evolved using fossil fuels to develop the solar panel technology, then these countries wouldn't be able to sort of leapfrog directly onto the new technology. So,
but why are they using the new technology? Is it because it's more economically beneficial as well? It's better for the environment, for the climate on the long term, but is it also on the short term more beneficial?
It's a little bit of both. So don't think, especially in a very remote region, solar-powered electricity cannot compete yet with diesel-powered electricity. It's still like at least double the price. There are some specific regions in the world where infrastructure is nice and you don't have to carry the solar panels on a donkey, 10 days in the jungle. Then it might. There's a lot of places where it reaches sort of parity with fossil fuel generation. But there's also a lot of push from the government. So that if you have, let's say, a renewable energy technology, then everywhere from a lot of the development country governments are getting their money, like, World Bank or International Finance Corporation or something like this. These guys are pushing for renewable energy technologies. So the government will effectively subsidize renewable energy technology to be on parity with the diesel generator. And then it doesn't make sense anymore to choose the diesel generator because it's also bad for your health.
Okay. I also heard that huge corporations are moving towards using renewable energies because economically it's already beneficial. And this is high capital, high tech companies.
Yes. So on scale, what I was talking about is very small scale, right? But on scale, on actual industrial scale, it's very region dependent. But in a lot of countries, renewable energy is actually cheaper. Especially wind energy. If you are in a very windy place, it's actually much cheaper to use wind energy than fossil fuels, which in this case would be coal power plants or natural gas power plants, and definitely cheaper than nuclear power plants. Here in the UK, for example, offshore wind, which is even more expensive than onshore wind because you have to go out in the sea and dug the pylon into the seabed, offshore wind is half the price of new nuclear power. They're actually building a large new nuclear reactor, and then offshore wind is just half the price.
Whoa.
And solar panel is cool. Solar power is basically on par with nuclear power.
That's cool. I mean, this could be a way which global economy, like capitalism, could be the authority which kind of forces nations into using renewables. If it would be on par or a bit better, then it could be a large push towards countries using renewables.
So this is very interesting because oftentimes there's a saying that the world should thank China, which is the largest emitter of CO2, because it's only because of China scaling up deployment and manufacturing that the prices have come down. Because 10 years ago, all the German solar power companies, which were the only ones to manufacture at that time, went bankrupt. and then the Chinese started to come in and then started scaling down. So that now solar panels are competitive price-wise.
Okay, so then it's again the same thing that now we have the cheap solar panels, but it was because they scaled up their economy, which had an effect, like additive effect on climate change.
Yeah, exactly. They scaled up on coal.
Okay.
But now they're replacing a lot of coal. So it's actually, this is an even trickier question, because we might say, if we want to be nice, that they actually want to think long term. And then they did sort of take a hit in the short term and then emitted a little bit of CO2 only to bring down the price so that they can install the renewable energy long term. China is not a democracy or a capitalist country. So they actually have the luxury to think long term because they don't have they don't have to worry about who's going to be elected in the next 4 years.
That's true.
But obviously this doesn't work for every country. Yep. If there is no capitalist economy behind China to take all the shit that they produce away from them, then their model wouldn't work anymore. So they're kind of like the other side of capitalism. They kind of need capitalism for their economy to function. So it's tricky.
It's a tricky problem and a tricky question. And how do you think that people could pressure politicians to take this, or policymakers, organizations, companies to take this issue more seriously? I think it's really hard. From all the issues people face in their daily life, it's really hard to prioritize this one.
I think so, yeah, because it always feels that it's very far. To be honest, my personal opinion is that we're doomed. Politicians are actually not going to do anything until water is at the window level. So, yeah, as you say, it's very difficult because it feels intangible. It's so far in the future.
Exactly.
So, yeah. What do you think?
I have the same fear.
But at the same time, this is also not a good attitude, right? Because this is not giving a solution, just pushing it away. So, yeah, we should think harder, perhaps. You know, just another thing. I was looking at some of these guys on Instagram. I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo has 100 million followers on Instagram. So maybe if you convince, like a famous example is Leonardo DiCaprio, right? If you convince some of the famous people to align with this cause, maybe they can pressure the politicians because then they have enough social capital to swing votes. Because otherwise the politician doesn't care, right? So I think yeah, you have to convince a lot of famous people to care, and I think that's actually happening already.
That's a good strategy. Yeah, actually, I saw it on 9gag. Now there's a new trend, a new challenge, like trending. It's called trashing or collecting trash, something like that. So you take a picture of an area which is full of litter, and then you take another picture after you all clean it up and put it in a trash bag. And then you pose.
I think it's trash tag.
That's it, trash tag. It's a very cool challenge, and I've seen that it started to get popular, and I'm very happy for it. So maybe trash tag will save us. Or
this is important, I think, because
maybe a meme will save us. Or push us in the right direction.
You get the right meme on PewDiePie's show, and then all his 100 million followers.
That's it. Maybe the same way we could use the technology of our society, about which we usually talk in a negative way, like how it affects our social life. But maybe we could harness the power of that for something like this.
It's a positive note.
Making some meme popular that I'm only voting for
the Green Party, whatever.
Green politicians. And then if it gets trending on Twitter, then maybe some members of parliament will take notice.
I think the younger generation who are already feeling or putting into thought that their kids actually will have very tangible, sufferable effects if we continue on the inaction path. These guys are already starting to do this because, let's say, in our generation, it was still even a question whether there is global warming or not. So thankfully, this started to go away and now it started to become accepted at least. And then I think slowly with time, The younger generation will have that sort of social power to force politicians to act. But this is a delicate, sensitive topic. Populist politicians will not care about reason, right? So you can only force sort of the smart politicians to actually follow your demands. The others will just do whatever they want.
And actually, they can find something which is of more immediate and more tangible threat.
Apparently.
And then use that as their campaign, as their political power.
Another thing I was actually, probably it's not connected anymore, but what I was thinking to say is that even if we force the politicians, let's say we have a super politician who wants to do, who wants to save the world. Let's say it's even the leader of the US or China who has some actual weight in the world. The problem is the economic system has a huge delay. So now our power plants, which are fossil fuel power plants, they have lifetimes of 50 years. So there's a huge lock-in that we have created. And, the bank or the investor has sunken its money into the power plant. He's not going to just stop the power. I mean, of course, there might be a law. Technically, theoretically, you can make a law that says from tomorrow it's illegal to operate a natural gas power plant. But then the people are going to go and shoot you in your house. And then they're going to put a president, the one that retracts a law. So
I see. Even if you don't build any new fossil fuel power plants, the ones already existing have still a lifetime of decades.
Exactly. So there's a massive lock-in effect into the existing system. So let's say if you start changing the system today with 100% green policies, it will take 50 years for the system to completely turn over. But then there's also, again, there's a little bit of hope. Because technological transitions are actually faster with time. Energy transitions usually take decades. But then, as you say, if the price of the alternative technology, let's say wind power, whatever that replaces the energy generation, if it becomes so cheap that it makes economic sense to turn off the fossil fuel power plant, let's say halfway through its lifetime, then, you might see a shift happening sooner. But there's also physical limits. So the solar panels and the wind turbines, they are nearing their physical limits in terms of efficiency. So the only way you can make them more efficient is making them larger or manufacturing them in larger batches, which is already, again, hitting its physical limits.
Or you could also enforce reducing consumption.
So this is tricky. What do you think about this? Could the government do something like you have a limited amount of money you can spend in a month, or a limited amount of energy you can spend in a month? Let's say the EU government would monitor and they would say, Andrea, you took your flight this year. Choose wiser next time.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine a policy like that you can take limited flights and after that you would pay a tax.
Yeah, a carbon tax. You already pay a tax for flying, but an even higher tax.
But an even higher tax. Or with your energy usage, like you would have to optimize a bit.
Yeah, man, capitalism can solve this. Dynamic pricing. You totally exponentially start pricing energy.
Yeah, but I don't know how much households contribute to the global consumption. Maybe it's not a significant.
It's about a third. So
then it's a significant percentage.
Industry, commercial space, and households, it's about 1/3 each. So the businesses already have dynamic energy pricing, but it has nothing to do with climate. Currently, it's just following the demand and supply curve. But actually, that's a very nice idea. I like it. That theoretically, the government should introduce sort of like a staircase-based price. In the country, the first unit of energy is cheaper, and then it gets exponentially more expensive. I think actually that you found it. That's it. Give yourself a Nobel Prize. I think you found the way. That's the way. That's the scenario. That's how you do it.
But how would that look like? I'm just curious. If they introduce these kind of restrictions, how would your daily life change? You would plan when to wash your clothes, when to cook.
I think so, yeah. But you don't have to plan, right? You have algorithms. You have smart devices. They will do it for you. You just have to use them.
That's true. They will say a reminder. Okay, you should cook now because now there's an hour of cheap electricity. Or the next window will be in 6 hours. So better cook now.
Man, my electricity provider in the UK already does this. I have a little device and I have a smartphone app, and then it sends me half-hourly electricity prices. And then I can set an alert that if the next half hour is above a certain time, it will show a notification on my app. I can even script it in Python. So for example, I have one of these smart plugs and I can put the plug on the washing machine, and then the washing machine can start at the lowest price signal if I really wanted to.
Nice. That's super
happening.
cool.
That's happening.
That's super cool.
But I think in terms of a country, there's still a lot of cracks in the idea. Because what if only one country introduces this thing? Then people will start importing canisters of diesel from the neighboring country, or people are unpredictable. So I think
people are resourceful. They'll find a way to cook whenever they want.
Exactly. So they will always game the system. There's this famous phenomenon called the Jevons paradox. Have you heard about it?
No, what's that?
The Jevons paradox is in one line, no matter how large you build a highway, it will always be congested. Or something like this. So basically, the longer version is that in the 1970s in LA, they had like a terrible congestion problem. And then because of that, they had a very large pollution problem. And so they introduced a law in which on odd days, only odd number plates were allowed to go. And on even days, only even number plates were allowed to go. This would work in an economy where people don't have policy resistance. Because what people did, then they bought two cars. So they had an even number car and an odd number car. But even worse, the odd numbered car was their second car, so they didn't really use it. They just got something old and cheap and second hand, which had a much worse emissions factor than their normal car. So overall, LA,
the policy backfired,
and they ended up with worse emissions.
That's crazy.
So with these policies, you have to be really careful because people, as you said, people are resourceful. They will find a way to game the system. Oh man, and there was another one. Also, same story, odd number and even number days in New Delhi. And then people have invented the 6886 number plate, which if you turn around, it's a 9889 number plate. and then you can just swap it.
Man.
Yeah, man, we're doomed. I think that's the takeaway. But there's a nice saying, actually, which I finish my presentations with usually. So basically, in Polynesia, the navigators, I think way before zero, they could sail from Tahiti to Hawaii. This is like a 4,000 kilometer journey, and it was totally in pre-technology era. And then there was an American guy who in the 60s went down to some of these Polynesian islands and interviewed a few people. And then the knowledge is unfortunately vanishing, but there were still a few guys who were knew from their grandfathers of how to sail the sea. And then they had a very nice explanation. What they said is that you have to look beyond the horizon, and then you have to picture the island that you are going to in your mind, especially because you've never been there. You really have to picture it because otherwise you can never get there. So basically what they're suggesting is that once you've committed onto a path, you have to have full trust that you're on the right path. Otherwise you will never. You have to keep persevering, even if it's a 4,000 kilometer journey, which is probably, I don't know, like a year's journey at that time. So I think climate change is like a little bit of a problem like this, that sometimes it seems so far away, but the danger with this is that if we lock ourselves into a trajectory, there is actually a time when it's too late. I think we are nearing that time when it starts to become too late to limit, let's say, to fit into this 1.5 degree limit, or oftentimes there's a 2 degree limit, which they say it's the absolute maximum that we should limit to. So if we're not careful now, you fall off of that path, then the Earth is, as you said, it's a large complex system, so you cannot reverse it. Once the sea ice melts, that's it, you're done. New York is underwater. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, if you focus on a goal, and you have much higher chances of achieving it or having good results. But I don't agree with the second part, that we are close to a time where we need to act or this is going to be terrible. I think we are way past that line. And I think what humanity can do is damage control, basically, to dampen the negative consequences.
There's two large arms of the science. There's the climate change mitigation guys, and there's the climate change adaptation guys. So I think you are in sort of the adaptation camp.
I am.
Actually, I had another idea. I think it would be nice.
Yeah.
It would be nice to produce an episode on biodiversity and the extinction of species, because together with climate change, what it has been happening at a much more alarming rate is the extinction of species together with industrialization. And I'm personally actually very interested to look at some of these numbers, which are very scary. I almost care more about we as a human race, we came here, we destroyed a lot of animals. Now we're going to destroy ourselves. We destroy ourselves. That's fair. We couldn't have enough. We just wanted too much. As you said, we wanted to grow too much. And maybe we overshot, so that's a fair punishment that humanity goes away. But it's not fair compared to all the other life forms of the planet. I mean, they have nothing to do with this, right?
Yeah, seems unfair taking down the animals with us and plants.
Yeah, so you should create a galactic ark. Send off the animals somewhere so that they can survive.
Yeah, they didn't choose this. They didn't vote for this. they didn't sign up for this climate change shit. Humanity, what are you doing?
Exactly, man. Exactly. Yeah, but then we came with our superior brains, and then we outmaneuvered them, man.
Yeah. Also, another idea that it came to my mind that as the climate will change, because we will have some kind of changes, we just don't know if the effects are severe or mild, but we will have effects. So will the animals revolt, have some kind of defense mechanism? For example, if it's going to be too hot in the African regions, maybe the birds won't migrate anymore. So they will stay where they are, and I don't know, they will go a bit crazy, attack people.
This is really interesting.
Like animal behavior, which will become chaotic because of the changed conditions in the environment.
For the animals, this change is very fast. Change over a few years or even a few decades. Their evolutionary systems, I think they are not adapting that fast. So they will just die out instead of... I think they will keep going. I think they will keep going back to Africa in the middle of the desert and just die. Their brain will not be able to process. But maybe I'm underestimating. Maybe I'm underestimating these poor animals. But
no, but you're right. Like their evolution is not changing so fast, but it's neither for us. But the thing is, if it gets colder, I can buy a bigger coat. But the squirrel,
exactly.
The squirrel will die on the tree
if it gets
develop
colder
a new
coat in 1 year. That takes ages. But at the same time, I think already, in terms of the animals revolting, already this is happening, because I was talking to some researchers in Kenya, and they said that the droughts have been becoming more severe in the past, let's say, few decades. So I was talking to a guy, let's say, in his 50s, and then he was saying that when he was a kid, there was very few droughts, and now there's every other year, basically a severe drought. And then there's a lot of wild animals which depend on the seasonal rains. And the rains have, this is next to the Kilimanjaro area, and the rains have shifted from one side of the Kilimanjaro to the other side. So there was a lot of animals who started taking migration paths that was previously not a migration path. And there was humans. I mean, there were villages on the way. And then the elephants basically went into the villages and rammed the people's houses. Yeah. This has never happened before. And then they have figured out that this is because of the shifting rains. So yeah, I think all of this is happening already.
Oh, that's crazy. Animals fighting with humans for the resources because they are getting more scarce.
Yeah.
And also the next level will be when humans will be fighting with other humans for those scarce resources.
Yeah, man, that's a world I hope I will not be around, but we could have taken the discussion in a much darker direction. But it is there. If you want to go into a corner of the internet you didn't really want to go to, search for a term called preppers, which is basically the people who are preparing for the end of the world, either by a nuclear war or climate change or whatever. And yeah, it's a scary corner. So yeah, people fighting with others for resources kind of narrative. Unfortunately, it's a possibility. So you have to think about it. Consuming less is what you can do. Yeah, man.
Oh, I had one more interesting idea. I mean, this is a bit far-fetched, but maybe it can go at the end after the credits. So if I could change a bit the religion now, I would put in the 10 Amendments, I would put the 11th one, that don't overconsume and use renewable energies. And imagine what effect would that have on the world if it was in religion, the way to act.
Man, I think you're on fire today. I think that's it. This is your second idea, and then both of them work. So yeah, I 100% agree. If you would put it into religion, it would just magically work. So I think the person you need to convince is not Leonardo, it's the Pope.
It's the popes.
The popes and whatever imams and.
Okay, that's perfect, because did you hear that the Pope is coming to Transylvania?
Yeah,
in
man.
June,
So next time, go in the front row and hold up a flag. The Pope needs to support climate change. So.